Today, a number of conservatives criticized Romney for his ill-timed statements. Here was Peggy Noonan on Fox.
I don't feel that Mr. Romney has been doing himself any favors, say in the past few hours, perhaps since last night. Sometimes when really bad things happen, when hot things happen, cool words or no words is the way to go.
And according to BuzzFeed, a number of Republican foreign policy experts also rebuked Romney. Quote, one, quote, very senior Republican foreign policy hand called it an utter disaster and said it was Romney's Lehman moment, referring to Senator McCain's tone-deaf response to the financial crisis back in September 2008. This advisor said, quote, they were just trying to score a cheap news cycle hit based on the embassy statement, and now it's just completely blown up. And a former aide to Senator John McCain's campaign told BuzzFeed, quote, it's bad just on a factual level that the statement was not a response but preceding, or one could make the case precipitating. And just calling it a disgrace doesn't really cut it. Not ready for prime time.
It was this week 4 years ago. It was this week during the last presidential campaign where the home stretch of that campaign had a very clear beginning. It was almost 4 years ago today, in fact, that the financial giant Lehman Brothers suddenly collapsed. By September 2008, the financial crisis in this country was pretty much in full gear, and it really changed the presidential election. Republican presidential nominee John McCain took the bold step of suspending his campaign in order to head back to D.C. to work on the crisis. The McCain campaign tried to sell that decision as a country-first, patriotic, bigger-than-politics kind of move, but John McCain ultimately did not really have anything of substance to say about the financial crisis when he got back to Washington. He did not seem to contribute meaningfully to any proposed solution. And him suspending his campaign to go back and essentially be seen sitting mutely in rooms where things were decided without him smacked of political desperation. And frankly, it was sort of downhill for his campaign from there till the end. It's not like there was no suspense on election night, but sometime between that campaign Hail Mary decision around this time 4 years ago and election night, it just started to feel like it was over for John McCain. And never more so than when Republican foreign policy stalwart Colin Powell went on Meet the Press and officially endorsed Barack Obama over the man from his own party.
I think he is a transformational figure. He is a new generation coming into the world, onto the world stage, onto the American stage, and for that reason, I'll be voting for Senator Barack Obama.
That endorsement from Colin Powell was sort of the nail in the coffin for John McCain's presidential campaign. Now, that endorsement, it should be said, appears to be on the bubble for Mitt Romney's campaign this time around, and it appears to be on that bubble in large part because of foreign policy, because of a stream of intemperate statements that Mr. Romney has made on foreign policy, at least statements that were seen as intemperate. This is what Mitt Romney said back in January about his strategy, for example, toward Russia.
This is, without question, our number one geopolitical foe. They fight every cause for the world's worst actors.
Russia, our number one geopolitical foe. That comment, as well as the foreign policy advisors that Mr. Romney surrounded himself with, ultimately drew this rebuke from Colin Powell. Watch.
I don't know who all of his advisors are, but I've seen some of the names, and some of them are quite far to the right, and sometimes they, I think, might be in a position to make judgments or recommendations to the candidate that should get a second thought. For example, when Governor Romney not too long ago said, you know, the Russian Federation is our number one geostrategic threat. Well, come on, think. It isn't the case.
Come on, Mitt, think. Mr. Romney's sort of half-cocked remarks about Russia being our number one geopolitical foe have been criticized, of course, to great effect by Democrats, by the other side, but they have also caused him a lot of trouble within his own party as well. It happened on this issue of Russia. It also happened on the issue of China. You may remember Mr. Romney running up against the same sort of problem on the issue of Chen Guangcheng, the blind dissident in China who was ordered to remain under house arrest by the Chinese government and who sought help from U.S. officials in China. While U.S. officials were engaged in intense and very delicate negotiations over Chen's fate, Mitt Romney took to the campaign trail in order to attack the Obama administration's handling of the situation. He based his attack solely on minute-by-minute reports that were coming out of China at the time the crisis was still ongoing.
It's also apparent, according to these reports, if they're accurate, that our embassy failed to put in place the kind of verifiable measures that would assure the safety of Mr. Chen and his family. If these reports are true, this is a dark day for freedom, and it's a day of shame for the Obama administration. We are a place of freedom here and around the world, and we should stand up and defend freedom wherever it is under attack.
A dark day, a day of shame, he said. Mr. Romney made those remarks at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on May 3rd. And they drew an almost immediate rebuke from even staunch conservatives like, for example, Bill Kristol that very same afternoon.
I mean, I'm happy to be critical of the Obama administration, as anyone is, but I think this is an awfully fast-moving story, and if I were advising Governor Romney, I would have said, you don't need to get in the middle of this story. To inject yourself into the middle of it this way, though, when there are all kinds of negotiations going on and a fast-moving target, I think is foolish. There's no need to butt into a fast-moving story when the Secretary of State is in Beijing in delicate negotiations and say it's a day of shame for the Obama administration. Hillary Clinton's waking up right now. Let's see if she can pull this off in the next 12 hours.
Turns out Secretary Clinton was able to pull it off. Just 8 hours after Mitt Romney declared a day of shame for the Obama administration, U.S. officials who were working on the problem at the time announced that they had reached an agreement with China that would allow Chen to travel to the United States. Mr. Romney's half-cocked handling of that situation was an embarrassment for him and his campaign, and it earned him some rather alarmed criticism even from conservatives at the time. And now Mr. Romney has popped off once again. Late last night, while the U.S. diplomatic missions in Egypt and Libya were still under physical attack, the Romney campaign, during those attacks, released a statement to the press not only attacking President Obama, but attacking U.S. diplomatic personnel in the places that were being attacked for their handling of the ongoing situations there. Mr. Romney's statement read in part, quote, "It's disgraceful that the Obama administration's first response was not to condemn attacks on our diplomatic missions, but to sympathize with those who waged the attacks." What Mr. Romney was presumably referring to there was this statement that was put out by the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. It was a statement that acknowledged an offensive, crude, anti-Islamic video that had been produced in the United States. That statement that Mitt Romney described in his statement as sympathizing with the attackers was put out a full 6 hours before those attackers even breached the embassy's walls. It was a statement that was trying to preemptively tamp down any possible protests over this stupid video. It was not a reaction to the protest. The protest didn't exist yet. Mr. Romney took a statement urging calm, and he used it as an opportunity to accuse the President of the United States of sympathizing with those who were, at that time, attacking the United States. By early this morning, after it became clear that a U.S. ambassador named Christopher Stevens had been killed in Libya, after it became clear that Mr. Romney's timeline of events in Egypt was completely wrong, the Republican presidential nominee took to the podium, and he did not walk back his initial remarks. He decided to double down on them.
The statement that came from the administration, and the embassy is the administration. The statement that came from the administration was a statement which is akin to apology, and I think was a severe miscalculation. The statements were inappropriate, and in my view, a disgraceful statement on the part of our administration to apologize for American values.
A part of the U.S. government was under attack. Mitt Romney responded while the attack was still going on to attack that same part of the U.S. government. He called the actions of embassy personnel in Egypt, quote, disgraceful. Just like in previous situations, some of the harshest criticism of Mr. Romney has been coming from his own side, from fellow Republicans. Former Reagan speechwriter Peggy Noonan telling Fox News today, quote, sometimes when really bad things happen, when hot things happen, cool words or no words is the way to go. Mark Salter, a former top aide to Senator John McCain, described Mr. Romney's comments today as unfair and hyperbolic, as well as unseemly in its timing. One senior Republican foreign policy veteran telling the website BuzzFeed today, quote, they were just trying to score a cheap news cycle hit based on the embassy statement, and now it's just completely blown up. It's an utter disaster. Another Republican telling BuzzFeed, quote, they're incompetent at talking effectively about foreign policy. This is just unbelievable. Those are the Republicans. To give you a sense of the magnitude of this as a screw-up, even just generic mainstream journalists and commentators who are not plainly for Mitt Romney or against him, people who aren't on one side or the other, people whose job it is to observe and therefore in some ways create the norms of politics, even they were shocked by how far this was outside what is considered to be responsible by anybody who wants to be taken seriously in American politics, let alone anybody who wants to be considered for a job as serious as being President of the United States. NBC's Chuck Todd said that he was stunned that the Romney campaign reacted the way that they did. He described the campaign's actions as irresponsible. ABC's Jake Tapper said that Mr. Romney's criticism, quote, does not stand up to simple chronology. Ron Fournier of the National Journal described Mitt Romney's response as ham-handed and inaccurate. Time magazine's Mark Halperin described it as one of the most craven and ill-advised tactical moves in this entire campaign. The Washington Post editorial board describing Mr. Romney's reaction as, quote, a discredit to his campaign. Republicans in positions of leadership, most Republicans in Congress, did not react today the same way that Mitt Romney did to this crisis. Statements from Republicans like John Boehner and Mitch McConnell mostly hewed to the sort of basically decent idea that when America is attacked, you don't pile on right that second while the attack is still happening. You issue sober statements of concern and anger over the attacks. You offer your prayers for the families of those affected, and you reiterate America's resolve in the face of this difficulty. And that was exactly the reaction today from most responsible Republicans. And that fact further shone a spotlight on how shockingly different Mr. Romney's statements were. There were talking points that the Romney campaign circulated today to other Republicans in an effort to get other Republicans to try to sound more like Mitt Romney, to start talking about this crisis more in the way that he did. Will he be able to drag the rest of the Republican Party into his way of seeing this?